Pride.com and Bear World.
Sure, yeah. Pride.com is owned by The Advocate magazine, and it's kind of like their more up-and-coming, maybe more millennial-based news site for LGBT folks and queer folks.
Okay.
There's a lot of different stuff, but it's all related to, like, LGBT issues. It can be a little bit more crass than, like, a lot of the sites that are online. Like, it's more crass than The Advocate for sure. I mean, I had an article up today about, like, how, like, ways for bottoms to deal with anal fissures. And, you know, there's, like, it's really, really informative and really educational in a lot of ways. And, you know, some of them are op-eds, some of the stuff's posted op-eds, and some are just news stories. And then there's a lot of listicles, which is, you know, made popular through BuzzFeed, like the 10 ways to do this or the X reason so-and-so does this type pieces, you know,
right. Yeah,
which are just becoming really popular and are interesting to write, because I've never thought about things like that when writing articles before. Like, how do I make this issue into 10 ways or 8 reasons or, you know, whatever? But it can be done. You can take serious issues and make them informative in that format, because they're more shareable. I mean, I can write an op-ed and, like, pour my heart out into it, and it's not going to get nearly as many shares or page views because people don't want to read it. So if you can make it short and sweet but still have an impact, it can really be done. So I've enjoyed working for Pride, and I like that the Here Media Corporation that, you know, owns Pride and The Advocate and Out Magazine, and it's been good. And then Bear World's something I've just started with. Bear World's a gay bear magazine. They had read a op-ed that I'd written about being bisexual, identifying as a bear, and a trans man. And they were really into it. And I think that they're trying to diversify, you know. So they've never had a trans writer before, and they want to bring me on. I just started writing for them, you know, so we'll see how that goes. But I think they're based out in England, but they're worldwide, and bears seem to love it. So I basically write whatever I want that's related to being a bear and also trans, because I think I'm, like, one of the only trans voices on there.
it's really cool. It's interesting because I feel like there's a lot of media, you know, back when there was like 2 media outlets for the queer community in the United States, and now there's so many of them, and some that I don't know about. And I just think it's amazing that, I mean, we're moving past, I believe that in a lot of ways, well, it depends on the audience, but in a lot of ways we're moving beyond the idea of inclusion and more of collaboration, right? Like, we're not throwing the trans community a bone here. We actually recognize that there are trans people within our community, and therefore their voices are just as important when it comes to content and when it comes to collaboration and when it comes to planning. So I always love to hear about, you know, whether it's trans writers with traditionally L or G or even LGB type of publications. And so, you know, I always think that it's an important thing in our community.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I think that one of the things that you discuss, that have discussed, and we'll get to the project in literally just a second, is that there's a difference between having a trans voice telling trans stories and talking about trans issues, and having a cis voice telling trans stories and talking about trans issues, right? And so I think it's awesome every time that, you know, you like post an article that's like, oh, I wrote this for, you know, this other place. I'm always like, great. So these are the places that I know are actually valuing trans voices, and that's an important thing to value, and therefore it's something that I'm going to pay more attention to. Yeah. So let's talk about Transilient. So I mentioned in your bio that you're the founder of Transilient, and this is actually for our listeners. Transilient is the whole reason that Basil and I were actually introduced. I have a mutual friend that I've known for years and years and years that was like, you gotta hit up this guy that I just, you know, started following, made friends with on Facebook. He's doing this project. And it was just such a stroke of luck that literally I messaged you, friended you, and I was going to be in the town you lived in within like 3 days, I think. It was crazy luck. But you just have to, like, I can't do it justice. So please tell our listeners what is Transilient about? What is its purpose, its mission, its vision? Like, what's the bulk of it? What are you doing?
So I've always been really into helping people have a voice and tell their stories. When I was working with JUFA, a big project that Justice for All did was something called How We Identify, which was a yearly music, arts, writing type event where people would use their identity in their work, however they wanted it to be. And I actually did a small documentary with a friend named Adam Cable, and we talked about different people's identities and what that meant in Asheville. It was very local and centralized. So Transilient is similar in that vein, but it's also very heavily inspired by Humans of New York. So if anyone's ever seen the Humans of New York project, it's basically the same format. It's a photo, brief interview documentation process. The difference between Humans of New York and Transilient is I only take photos of and interview people on the trans spectrum. So whether they're gender nonconforming, gender queer, transgender, however it is, they're the people that will be interviewed. And the difference amongst that and other projects is, like, I'm not talking about anyone's identity at all. So basically I'm interviewing trans folks, but talking about things that are important to them that don't have to do with their identity or have helped form who they are that don't have to do with their gender. And it's been really interesting because it's such a breath of fresh air since, you know, when you read about trans folks, you read about our bodies or, like, why we transitioned or when we transitioned or, like, whether or not people will love us or, like, people being murdered or, you know, fairly one-dimensional caricatures of us. That has been written primarily to fulfill the cis gaze and a lot of the times written by cisgendered writers or reporters. So it's an all trans-based project. And yet we're not talking or mentioning transgender identity at all.
Yeah. Another big difference between this project and Humans of New York is Humans of New York is Humans of New York, right? What you're doing is you're traveling around. Like, what do you have? Like, how many spots are you planning on? Do you have certain legs? Like, where are your travel parameters here?
We're doing a figure eight. So the other person involved in this project is my partner, Johanna, who also lands on the gender spectrum, but she feels comfortable using she and female pronouns. And so we're starting when we leave New Orleans. We've also done 5 interviews already in New Orleans. And then we're leaving New Orleans and going to Biloxi, Mississippi, doing a quick interview there, and then headed to Atlanta, where I have about 3 or 4 interviews lined up. I'm going to stay in Atlanta that night, and then we're driving to Charleston, South Carolina, where I have a surprising amount of people wanting to get interviewed. I think like 5 or 6 people have tried to contact me to get interviewed there, and we're going to be there for 2 days, so I'm going to try to get as many in as possible. And then we're going to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Winston-Salem, Durham, and then we're going to Asheville, where I'm from and where I met Johanna. And we're going to borrow her dad's car because it's much nicer than our 1991 Nissan truck. And so we're going to pick that up, and we're going to do a couple interviews there, and then we're headed to the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. And I'll be getting interviews there and connecting with people and networking. And then from Philly, I'm going to New York City. I'll be staying in New York for 3 days. I have about 5 interviews lined up in New York. And then we're considering going to Boston and staying in the Massachusetts area. She's from Massachusetts, my partner. They're from Great Barrington, which is in the Berkshires. And then after that, we're going to start going west. So we're going to hit like Detroit, Chicago, go through Lincoln, Nebraska, kind of like start going into the Southwest, go through the Grand Canyon, go all the way up California, go through Portland, Washington State, and then come back down, and then go through Texas, come back to New Orleans. So we're going to make some stops along the way when people contact us. I mean, I think I have like, I don't know, something like 25 people already lined up to be interviewed on the trip. But then on top of that, I know I'm going to meet so many people at the health conference.
Right. And so, I know that you have talked about this in the past about, you've got these different quote unquote legs to the trip. Are you going to be taking any kind of downtime or break time in between legs, or are you just doing like all of it back to back to back until you're done?
I think that the first leg is going to be the busiest because we're like trying to squeeze a whole bunch of stuff in before getting to Philly. And then when we go across the country from there, I think it's going to be a little bit slower. I mean, the summer is basically going to be devoted to interviews and basically getting stuff up. And then we're going to take a break in general for a while, like a couple of months maybe, and try to become a 501c3. And we do want to, hit some areas that we've missed after that, and are also talking about trying to take it global if it gets good reception, But, like, I think it'd be great to, take a trip to one country at a time and, like, try to, like, get folks in India and, like, Europe and, Canada even. Like, Canada's huge. It's our neighbor. It's really easy to get to. And try to do it that way next. And that might take a little bit more time depending on if we can get, grants or funding or whatever. So that's, like, kind of far off in the future, and we're just looking at right now doing this first leg, but do want to continue it as soon as possible. And depending on how many interviews I get, I don't have to post them all at once this summer, and I can, like, kind of slowly, like, post them after that.
So basically what you're doing is you're spending the entire summer traveling around, and then after that take some time, get your bearings, figure out where else you're going to go and funding and getting your status, whether it's 501c3, whatever. So really though, you are literally about to embark on several months of travel. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, at the very least 2 months.
Yeah, that's a lot of time not to sleep in your own bed.
Yeah, I'm bringing my dog, and my partner will be with me, so that's helpful. But I'm pretty excited. I mean, I know I'm like such a homebody, and I don't know how into anyone is into astrology besides me, but I'm a Cancer, and that like says a lot about wanting to be at home. But I'm also just really just kind of feel like it's time. Like, this is like a project that I've thought up and like proposed to other publications and wanted to do for a while, and then was just like, you know what, like, I'm gonna do it. Like, I'm just gonna raise funds and do this myself and see if anyone would be into, one, being interviewed, or two, supporting it financially, And I've gotten such a huge amount of positive feedback and excitement from all kinds of people. This is the first thing I think I've ever done where I haven't really gotten any negative feedback. Like, I am a writer online, so I'm used to, like, getting people attacking me, like, pretty much daily. But it's I don't think anyone has said anything negative. I mean, one person said something like, that made me think that they just didn't read what I was doing because it was, like, so far off base. But other than that, like, I've just been like, wow, like, this, to me, that's like a huge sign, like a green light, like, go ahead, like, this is what's meant to happen. So I feel pretty confident in traveling, and my partner and I like to travel. That's something that we have in common very much, and we do it well together, which is great. I mean, there are some people you just can't travel with, and Johanna's not one of them. I love traveling with them, and it goes really well.
I mean, I got to be honest with you. I've been with my wife for 10 years, and I love traveling with her. I really do, and I love spending time with her. But I just have to wonder whether 2 months in a car with her wouldn't make me, once in a while, I'm sure that if it was me, I'd hit a town and I'd go, okay, so tonight you're going to go hang out without me. And because I need a little bit of space from you, because the inside of this car is kind of small with this dog and me and you for 2 months. But I think that's awesome, because the idea of driving all around is kind of great. Did you come up with the plan of the states based purely on, like, people who have reached out to you and said, I'm interested in talking to you? Or did you come up with a rough outline of let's start in the South and work our way to Trans Health and then hit these specific cities, first and then reach out to those people? Like, how did you come up with this path?
I did kind of base it around wanting to go to Philly. So it was just